I'll just start with the agenda. We're going to have a rocking good time this evening. So I'm going to be giving a presentation where I'm trying to sort of pull together as much as I can without overwhelming you, which I might end up doing anyway. But this will be made available. Melissa will be recording it. Are we recording it yet, Melissa? We will be recording this. We will send out the link so that you can review it.
Yes, confirmed.
Okay. Confirm that we're recording or confirm that you're sending this out to folks. Okay.
We are recording.
Okay, very good. So I'm going to do a presentation, then I'm going to give us a bit of a couple of minute break to just sort of let things sink in a little bit and let you get some water or coffee. And then we're going to come back and I'm pretty much turning it over to all of you. We're going to go through the community resilience audit that many of you filled out. We're going to do it in a couple of different ways, but first we're going to start out with talking about part A, sort of some of the issues that came up when you were doing the audit. And then I'm going to ask you all to present some of your findings and your ideas for the parts B and C. And it's going to be lightning round because we probably will only have about 4 minutes a person to do that, to get through everyone, depending on how many. We have about 10 folks signed up. So so just think about what you're going to say and how to say it sort of quickly and efficiently. And if we have time for that, I'm going to ask for feedback on the community assessment, you know, sort of what worked, what didn't work, if you have other things that we should add to it, how effective you felt it was, because this is sort of a beta test for us. And then Melissa is going to talk a little bit about sort of how to keep the ball rolling, how to sort of move towards implementation, what some funding opportunities might be, what else is going on in the Mid-Hudson Valley area. We have a new deputy county exec, Amanda Laval, who sounds amazing and has a really strong background in sustainability. So this is a very good thing in cooperation with Jan Metzger. So for Ulster County, we're looking really good in terms of actually taking some of these ideas and finding ways to actually present it, you know, perhaps, you know, to the county executive or county planning. So there's sort of a trajectory that I'm putting you on here, whether you know it or not, to sort of find out ways that we can actually get some of your projects implemented, because that's always the key. All righty. So when we talk about, you know, this work, problem definition is critical. And my friend Gary Toth, who's a transportation engineer, he says, when you meet your DOT, you don't say, we need a crosswalk, we need a stop sign, we need a signalized intersection, we need wider sidewalks. You have to sort of express the problem, which is it's not safe for kids to walk to school, you know. So looking at the problem is a really key part of this. So this is just my tale of two cities, Corning and Elmira. You may recall Hurricane Agnes in 1972, and Susquehanna River overflowed its banks and kind of wiped out Elmira and Corning. And these two towns had a completely different take on their recovery. So in Elmira, as you can see, they got the civil engineers the Army of Civil Corps of Engineers to build them a wall. They never were going to flood again. If you've been to Elmira, you cannot see the Susquehanna River. It's a beautiful river, but they basically walled it off. So they basically walled themselves off from this beautiful natural landscape and resource. In Corning, they said, so can we use your money? Do we have to build a wall? They said, no. Can we use your money to rebuild our main street? And they said, yeah, but it's going to flood again. And they're like, are you going to give us money to rebuild our main street if it floods again? And the Army Corps and FEMA said, sure. So that's what they did. Okay, and let me just get to my next slide. Or am I here? What's happening? Sorry. Okay, so Corning and Elmira today. Well, this was taken about 5 years ago. They're the same size. Their building stock is nearly identical. Their streets, you know, look, but Whereas in Corning, they use their money, they improve their sidewalks, they put in street trees. In Elmira, they're convinced that in order to get more people there, they need more parking. So anytime a business moves into a building, they tear down the building next door to build more parking. So you have basically, this is what the streetscape is. So on the left is Corning. They have small shops, they have restaurants, they have a radio station, soup places, outdoor dining. And in Elmira, it's a very pedestrian, unfriendly environment. And that building you see on the far right here, if you can see my arrow, which looks like cold storage or a transformer for Verizon, it's the Mark Twain Theater. It's a cultural destination, but they have just designed for cars instead of for people. They made that decision in 1972, and that just seems to have steamrolled into a philosophy about making it easier for cars to get there, making it easier to park. Corning is always about Main Street, Main Street, Main Street. You know, you park at the museum, at the Corning Glass Museum, and you take a shuttle over. It's all about place, and it's all about people. So that's why these decisions that they're sort of indicative of a mindset. You know, so I just wanted to sort of pause it there. And this is why things go awry. This is the traditional project planning process, where there's a problem defined, you know, whether it has to do with flooding or air quality or traffic congestion. And then there are constraints. How do we what are the constraints to solving this? How do we avoid the constraints? How do we mitigate against what might happen and the unperceived and unintended consequences? And then we sort of get our approval, and maybe we build it, and maybe we go back to the drawing board. So it starts with a problem and how you solve all the issues around the problem. The goals are defined very narrowly. So defining your goals as broadly as possible and incorporating as many ideas as you can. Usually these things are politically initiated or crisis driven. This is why community meetings are so incredibly fraught and angry, is because usually you're coming into a meeting, you're looking at a design for a solution to a problem that you had no role in defining. So the problem that they're fixing is not the problem that you had. You wanted more recreational space for your kids or more tree cover, and they're coming up with something completely, different. So this is the typical way projects get done, no matter what department you're in. It's changing slowly, but it doesn't really get us the kind of places and resilient places that we want. And part of the problem is no one sees the big picture. Depending on what department you work for or what your field of expertise is or what your passion is, you're seeing that situation from that perspective, which is why people standing around an elephant blindfolded have no idea that it's an elephant. So seeing the big picture, really taking a step back and looking at how all the parts fit together is really key. It's kind of like making pizza. To make pizza, you got to put all the ingredients together and you got to bake it. It's great if you've got all of these sort of separate things and you've got your different land uses and you've got your different government departments, but they really only make pizza. I do a lot of analogies, if you haven't noticed, when you integrate these things together. And that's really what we're talking about, because you go to some towns and it's like they've got everything. They have a theater, they have a coffee shop, they have a waterfront, but it's just not hanging together, and it's because these things have not been connected. So this is sort of a process that I, used in most of my career, which is all about starting with the place and understanding the place, working with the stakeholders to define the place. What is it? What does it mean to us? Then you evaluate it, come up with a vision for how to improve it, and then try things out. It's like when you go to the doctor. Go to the doctor and you say, I need surgery. Okay, that's your problem definition. I've come up with this. What does the doctor do? He identify the stakeholders and say, hey, let me take your medical history. Let me figure out, who you are, what your background is. I need your medical history. I need to figure out, how did this come to happen? How long have you had these symptoms? Okay. The next thing the doctor does, they run tests. We evaluate the space and identify issues. They run tests. They run tests to figure out what's not working, what is working, what could be the situation, what could be the cause of this, and how might they want to treat it. The treatment plan is our place vision. You know, what the doctor comes up in terms of how we're going to try to address this is the place vision. And then he doesn't say, okay, see you in 6 months, see you in a year. The doctor will say, or she'll say, you know what, try this for 3 months, see if it works. Let me know if you have any symptoms. If that doesn't work, we'll try a different treatment, a different medication. We'll put you on a diet. We'll give you exercise. We'll do these experiments to see what works. And then we sort of do the final evaluation of this is working, this is not working, or yes, in fact, you do need surgery. So we used to be called a Project for Public Spaces. We used to be called space doctors because we would come in and sort of fix unhealthy spaces. This process empowers communities because the stakeholders are sort of advising and suggesting, and the experts are not leading it. The experts, the professionals, are informing, facilitating, designing, and implementing. And when you engage people from the beginning, the process goes faster and they become stakeholders in actually helping to maintain and manage the final project going forward. So the stakeholder piece, you can't do it alone. I love this. You can't build a barn alone. You know, we know this from history. You've got to have partners. So there's a lot of different partners that are looking at resilience and placemaking and community that we need to kind of think about possibly folding them into this. We're the environmental sustainability piece. Are we talking to our public health folks, our local food system folks? We're talking to the transportation department, historic preservation, preserving and reusing buildings, you know, which saves materials going into the waste stream and preserves our urban fabric. Local economies, can this work, this environmental sustainability, resilience work, create jobs and create incomes for people? How can artists and culture bearers become involved in this process? Community development is a key piece of this. And basically civil society, democracy building, civic infrastructure, the people that are really looking at empowerment and inclusion are all partners that we can be thinking about sort of in that circle, because it's always a lot of concentric circles. So on a more local level or individual level, rather than organizational or sectoral level, we can talk about partners, residents, representatives from diverse cultural communities, youth. I've been talking about the wonderfulness of teenagers and how incredibly helpful they are and how they really want to be involved in shaping their future. Local businesses, community foundations, civic organizations, landscape architects, you know, the professionals as well, and engineers. As you move forward with the project, you don't really start with those folks, but think about the usual and the unusual suspects. So we like to recommend creating a dedicated committee of folks that want to work with you. And if you notice at the bottom, I'm showing you've got little captions about the small town communities that I've worked in where we have actually, you know, done this work. So this was in Franklin, New Hampshire. And what do you want your stakeholders to do? You can commit them. This is called the circle of engagement. I usually threaten to lock the door, and people are not allowed to leave the meeting until they put their name and email and phone number on a sticky note somewhere on this diagram. Okay. So you have your core group of people that are really gung-ho and they want to help you and they want to do a lot of things. Then you have the helpers that say, I'm really busy, you know, I've got a lot going on in my life, but like if you're having an event, let me know. I'll bake, I'll show up, I'll give out flyers, I can help. Then you have the champions who are, I can't really help, but I'm going to let everybody know that you're having an event. I'm going to tweet about it. I'm going to do social media. If you want me to write a letter to the mayor, I'll do that for you. And then there are the folks that just want to know what's going on. Keep me in the loop. But what's wonderful about the circle of engagement is it's fluid. So you've got the core people who get burnt out and tired and need a break. And they're like, I want to be a champion. And the helpers decide that they really are excited and they have more time and they want to be a core person. And the informed people, you kind of work with them to move them into the champion helper circle. So you can sort of move people through this where you've got quite a bit of core, but you can always reach out to a champion and say, would you mind helping us? Or ask a helper if they could actually help do a program and take on more responsibility. Now you do need a team that's kind of running this, but this is kind of how you collect your folks and you help them define roles. It's good to do that in a meeting. Attend their events and sit in on their meetings. So if they're doing something and you're interested in what they're doing and you want them to be a partner, go to their meeting, go to where they are. This was a reveal of a design concept for improvements to a park that floods in Thomasville, Georgia. And they were having a high school football to do with tailgate party before. And it was a high school tailgate party. So it was like hot dogs, hamburgers, and families. It was outside. We didn't have easels. We didn't have a wall. We had a school bus. We put the drawings on the school bus. We clipped them to the windows. And as the parents and the kids and the family were having their hot dogs and getting ready for the football game, they came up to the bus and we got their input and ideas on some of these park designs and what they would like to see. And so that's what we did at a high school tailgate party. You can take them out and evaluate a place. The community resilience assessment is really just one of many tools, but in order to do this work, you generally need to be in the place that you're looking at. I don't know if you all had time to do that because ours was a little bit more broad-based, but if you got down to a specific district or neighborhood or waterfront or park or farm, you'd want to take people out there because you can't, once you're not in that space, you kind of forget all your ideas. And if you're not in that space, you kind of forgot what it looked like. So it's really important to take people out. Visit other communities. This is not rocket science nor brain surgery. There are other towns and communities in our area or nearby where if we can get our elected officials to go visit or bring someone here from another town that's done something similar to what you're interested in doing, do that. We don't get a chance to go everywhere. People are often in silos, and as my friends in Appalachia say, they live one holler to another. Like no one knows what anyone is doing anywhere else in the county. But there could be fabulous things happening just, 30 minutes away. Okay, the next step is to evaluate the space and identify the issues. And this is where you engage the community again. So you've got your stakeholders and you've got folks that are going to help and they're going to publicize it and they're going to volunteer. But you need the input from the folks that are impacted. So these are just some ideas. So there's the resilience assessment, which I had you all do, which you can do with other folks. Once you get some ideas together about what people really want, you need to prioritize them. Dots are really helpful. You just take photographs, you mount them on phone core, you put the dots on, you either count the dots, take pictures of the dots, and then you can tally the most popular ideas. Because if you have limited funding, you don't necessarily know where to start first. So you let people say, these are the ideas that we've come up with. What are the most popular? And this one, it looks like everybody wants everything, which is sometimes the case. But you can phase these things too. The chalkboard is an amazing thing. You can paint this on a wall. You can put it, just get chalkboard paint on plywood and just, stencil on there. This was University of Mississippi students did this for us. And this was for a trailhead at a park, what it needs and what should be here. And then you take a picture of it and then you wipe it clean and you put it back out. So that way more people can give ideas. So you probably know a lot of these things. Community asset mapping is really about, again, these are very hands-on tools where you take a map of the community and you put dots on things. So in this case, the dots are numbered, the food places, the civic places, the civic buildings, the lodging, and the parks. So you can see what you have and how close things are to one another, because often you don't realize, you've got a library next to a park, but the library never uses the park. Why don't they use that? Why don't they use that as an outdoor reading room or a demonstration garden for sustainable agriculture or something? So mapping this is also a great way to get people together, and you don't need to be a planner, and you don't need to, English does not need to be your predominant language. You just sort of identify what you think are the assets and then how to link them together. and then how to make them better. So this is another way of doing it, where the green dots are the good things, the yellow dots have potential, and the red dots are really problematic. And I might have mentioned this before, but you want to start with the greens and the yellows because the reds will follow. Don't start with the hardest, most difficult project, space, or area. You need to get some wins under your belt and your stakeholders really engaged and feeling confident and empowered to take on the bigger challenges. And then, of course, reporting back is always really, really, really important. I've been to meetings where the consulting team, there's someone in the back, usually a woman, is furiously typing notes. I have no idea if my thought was captured. I have no idea if she got what I was saying correctly, or anything. So I like writing on big pieces of flip chart paper, sticking them on a wall, and then having people, report back their findings so that the information is generalized. Everyone can see it. You can take pictures of it, scan it, type up the notes. But to close the loop, you've got all these ideas going, and then you just don't know that they've actually been captured. It's one of the things that helps to build trust in the process. Okay, the next step, place vision. Are you all with me? Is everything okay? Okay, great. So I worked on this project. Springfield, Massachusetts had a tornado in 2012, and it hit the richest neighborhoods and it hit the poorest neighborhoods, because that's what tornadoes do. And when we were working on this project, the idea was, what was the greatest asset of Springfield? What were the things that people in the entire city thought of when they thought of Springfield? How did they define their place, that city? And it was Court Square, which is this very traditional square in the center of town that had a lot of devastation, beautiful trees. This is where the Christmas tree is in the holiday time, near theaters, etc. It had a lot of devastation. So if you have the chance, rebuild the most cherished public spaces first. Get the library back open, If the supermarket, when the supermarket in Hoboken reopened after Hurricane Sandy, I mean, everybody was like, there was like a celebration. So those are the things that really spark hope and show that change is happening and that recovery is on the way. So Court Square had never really worked terrifically well as a public space. So we came up with the community, all these activities for what to do there in the wintertime, activating it in a way that it hadn't been activated before, basically making it better than it was. And then there was a summer event diagram, what to do in the summer, kids play areas and tables and chairs and things like that. And then we went to a community that actually didn't have any public space in Ward 6, predominantly African-American neighborhood. It's near Springfield College and the library. So we transformed an unused green space and traffic islands into community activated space for celebration of local history and culture, youth engagement, and enlarged farmers market, and places for the library to provide outdoor programming. So we basically took what was vacant space, destroyed space, cleared space, trees came down, etc., and gave the community back a green space, a public space that they didn't have before the tornado happened. It's what they say, building back better, building forward. It's not just about restoring what was there. It's about how do we make it better going forward. This is a project that I've been involved with, working with Ontior students and my colleague Karine Dutay from Can Landscape Design. The town of Olive got a really small grant from the Musser Fund, and we got some funding from the Nature Conservancy, and we work with high school students to come up with ideas for how to reuse 4 flood vacated buyout properties in Boyceville across from the high school. So very quickly, Hurricane Irene, Boyceville flooded, the supermarket flooded. New York City owns half of our town. So New York City came in and they bought up flood damaged parcels that could not be restored because the cost of repairing it was more than the actual cost of the building. And they purchased the buildings and then raised them and then gave the town the land. So the town of Olive, the hamlet of Boyceville, is being pretty much hollowed out. And the idea is that you really can't build anything permanent here. but what could happen? So we work with students to do 2 public workshops. They did a survey for their classmates to get ideas from what people would like to see on these properties. And then we did these mental maps of ideas and where they could go. And they had lectures. They went out in the field and they went with DEC and they looked at the riparian areas. And we had a lecture from Native American elders about the Native American indigenous history of the area. And they did mapping. This is just one example. And we did these sort of concept plans. So this is kind of the vision of, this is a small lot next to the supermarket, which we thought could have a dog run and a demonstration garden. And it is next to the reservoir food pantry. So we thought the people who go to the food pantry could actually have their own garden plots and raise food, or there could be fruits and vegetables made available to the patrons of the food pantry so they could get fresh food as well as whatever the pantry was offering. And then we did sort of more of a detailed concept plan, sort of laying out where all of these things might go. Leola, you have your hand up. Did you want to ask a question? Okay, you're mute.
I was wondering, how do you, the Build Back Better, Build Forward that you mentioned, how do you get in there? And I don't mean you, I mean we, the collective you, because, so often they just want to rebuild the way it was before. So how did you get in there to say, hey, there's a better way, let's do this better?
Yeah.
I mean, I guess maybe some people come to realize that out the get-go, but I think a lot of communities just want to rebuild the way it was.
Right. Well, a couple of things. And it was, we did this 6 months after the 6 months after the tornado. You can't do this work instantly because there's triage and there's trauma and things. But about 5 to 6 months afterwards, when people are sort of settled and they know that their roof is going to get fixed and things are a little bit calmer, you bring them back, you say, okay, this is your reality. Let's think about the future. Springfield had a lot of problems, years of mismanagement by the government, by the administration, a lot of racial inequities and economic insecurities. It was a troubled city. And we weren't trying to fix everything, but we decided that, we needed to do something other than just rebuild the buildings. Springfield got a lot of money from the government and they created Rebuild Springfield, and Rebuild Springfield was this sort of independent organization that was charged with thinking about the future of the city. And it had different staff, city staff on it, and a nonprofit board. And so there was an entity created in order to spearhead this process of thinking forward, taking this opportunity to fix a lot of problems. And they had a new mayor and a new administration. And so that was it was really good timing. If they hadn't had the tornado, they wouldn't have had the money to do this. Yes, Maria.
Yeah, how much of it was implemented, and have they gotten started also on the Boyceville project?
How much of this was implemented? To be honest with you, I don't know. I'm sorry. I haven't kept up with it. But if you look up Rebuild Springfield or you could probably find out. I should have done that. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
And with this project, what happened is that the Nature Conservancy really loved what we were doing with the youth and with, ideas of how to reuse these vacant properties. And they helped us write a grant to the National Fish and Wildlife Foundation for site assessment and preliminary design, and looking not just at these 4 parcels, but there's actually another 4 parcels that are eligible for buyout. It's a total of 8 acres. And the idea was to make it part of a school curriculum or an after-school curriculum and have the students learn about soil ecology and environmental design, and work with environmental engineers and do sort of more of the community visioning and take their learning, because this is all about students learning about all these fabulous careers that are available, and taking that to another level. So we got the grant. The grant was awarded in November. And now the town of Olive and the National Fish and Wildlife Federation are kind of figuring out how to move forward, how to make this project actually work. Because we did it, but then we're like, now the town has to manage, you know, a $300,000 federal grant, which takes a lot of time and energy. And so this has to go out to bid because it's federal funding. And we're just hoping that they, you know, that the town and the Fish and Wildlife Foundation, you know, come to agreement and can move forward on this. So right now we're in a holding pattern, but there is funding to move forward, which is overwhelming because there were only 3 projects funded in the entire state of New York from this grant. One was the living shoreline in Montauk. One was a cove, I believe, in Queens, and then the town of Olive, like of all of upstate New York, just tiny town. So we will see what happens, but we're excited for the future. So Place Vision, more Place Vision. I don't know if you've been to the Broadway Bubble. It's a new laundromat. It was part of it was funded by the Novo Foundation. It's next to the soon to be open Kingston Food Co-op. And it's a laundromat as a community hub. And my friend Karine Dutay worked on this with the youth from the Kingston Farm Project, Kingston YMCA Farm Project. And this is what they want to do in the outdoor community spaces, also known as asphalt parking lots. So they are on the Green Line. The site is part of the Broadway streetscape. And they've done some wonderful things in front of the laundromat. And now they have all these ideas for games and landscaping and pollinator gardens and art and activation. Laundromats are really these undiscovered gems of public spaces. Well, they're privately owned, but if you know, when you go to the laundromat, you're there for hours, and you're often with your kids. Or you've got, you know, the grandmother takes the kids and there's nothing to do. So the idea that a laundromat can be a public community space with rooms and, you know, areas inside for discussion of issues, community meetings, play spaces outside, places for the community to make art while they're in the spin cycle, teaching art to kids who don't get it in school. This is all part of that program, and laundromats are really like have that opportunity to become these community places. We go to the river to wash our clothes. I mean, like communal washing of clothing is sort of part of our collective unconscious DNA. Having your own washer dryer in your house is not. So, you know, this is also more sustainable because you've got everybody doing their laundry together, whatever. So this really is, can be these community gathering spaces. So they haven't done very much here, but they do have festivals and things outside. So the last part of this is the short-term experiments, which basically are where we figure out how to make things happen and how to get stuff on the ground, even if not completely finished. So why do experiments? It sparks creativity. It shows proof of concept. If you've been at a planning meeting and there's a plan and it sits on a shelf for 2 years and nothing happens, you are disgruntled and you don't trust the situation or the people leading it, and you lose interest. So we really want to keep people hooked. You can evaluate the impact and refine changes before things are made permanent. You build momentum and you get more out of your investments. You can do it this way. This is a whole lot easier. Start at the top with small changes that pick up momentum and speed. It's a lot easier to do that. So some examples, you build on your assets. You can build on your green assets, create mini destinations, have institutions activate the spaces around their building, do experiments on your streets, support more walking and biking and advocacy for that. So I'm just going to go through these really fast. This is a Girl Scout. This was a Girl Scout badge project in Portland. Special events. This is Bastille Day in Brooklyn. I don't think anybody here is French. Doesn't matter. Parking Day we talked about. It's the third Friday in September. Rebar in San Francisco will help you figure out how to do this. You turn a parking space or many parking spaces into a park. with longer term changes can be in mind. This is in Philadelphia. This project took 10 years to do. They started with Dots closing, basically the street wasn't really used, Dots furniture. Then they brought in the e-bike, the bike share, the little free library, the tables, the chairs, the concerts, the movie nights, and they raised money by naming rights to chairs and tables. You can see there's a little like name there. Ticket sales to events, summer jazz concerts, and film screenings. And I'm sure they got money from a downtown business improvement district. But this was just an unloved sort of triangle alley. Better Block is an organization that does short-term transformations, which helps people envision change and can help traffic engineers and others see that changing the street design isn't going to create a disaster. So this is a street in San Antonio that we worked on over the course of a weekend. We got the stores and the restaurants to activate the sidewalks. We narrowed the street, temporarily, adding temporary planters and plants and pots. And we've heard that if you go to Home Depot, I might have mentioned this, and you buy a whole bunch of plants to put out for a weekend or a day, and you bring things back, whatever can be resold, they'll refund your money. A project I worked on in Milwaukee, a little bit bigger, but transforming part of a parking lot into a park with a drumming circle and picnic tables and hopscotch and all kinds of other games. And someone said to me, how on earth did you get permission to have outdoor fire and roast marshmallows? It's like, because we had the chief of the fire department there with us, helping us do this. And then creating a plan, it could be a sketch, a diagram, identify short-term solutions, kind of lay this out. So this is where you need a little design help to do it. But this is sort of the spectrum that we're working on, from shorter term, recurring events, mobile equipment, light amenities, to sort of more permanent infrastructure. You can stay with the short-term things, but as you build momentum, you can think about adding more amenities and then sort of more intense uses. So I mentioned the tiny town of Hallam, Nebraska, with the 400 people and no stop signs. This is it. This is their entire downtown. Yay. And that's a big highway over here. So they wanted to have Hallam Days, and they wanted to improve their streets. So now this was a project that we had members of the town board and Parks Department and members of some civic nonprofit organizations. So we had leaders who could make change happen. People in decision-making power were part of this. They were helping us lead this. So this is they chalked painted hearts in the intersection. They wanted bump outs, so they went to Home Depot. They got some burlap, and it doesn't look gorgeous, but it slows the traffic. Here are volunteers with their, little steer skids. Everybody's got equipment like this in their backyard, doing mulch. You can make, benches out of 2x4s and some cinder blocks and paint them. They did a little pop-up library. This is the joint compound lids painted black and red to mimic checkerboards. Of course, there was food. And then they had their own sort of chalkboard, so that when you're at this event and you're testing out the first range of ideas, the first round of great ideas, we got the bump outs and we did the checks and the checker and we had benches. Okay, what's the next level? What's the next layer we're going to? We want a dog park. We want walking paths, a swimming pool. These are bigger ticket items. Some of these are more expensive, some are not. Some take longer, but you're always sort of continuing to generate the ideas. So it's a very iterative process. I have 2 minutes left. So another way of thinking about this is thinking small in a big way. So here's an idea for a healthy food hub. Let's say you have a farmer's market. Great. Okay, farmer's market, great. Can you put that on the plaza where there can be activity? Can there be a bus stop there? Is there space for a community garden? Is there a space for value-added food production nearby, where people who are, buying tomatoes can then go make sauce or tomato sauce with them? There could be a grocery store nearby, because when you're going to the farmer's market, you still need toilet paper. So co-locating those things together, and then bringing in healthy, other kind of healthy businesses, like that's when the farmers market is, that's when they do the blood pressure testing or the eye care clinic, cooking demonstrations. So you start with a farmer's market, but then you think about, or, what other healthy businesses or green businesses can be there? And can we then help people start growing food and then preparing food afterwards and then make money selling the food and also keep people healthy because food is the first step of health. So you're layering these things together in that way. And a destination is another way to do that. This is in Central Detroit in a neighborhood. This was funded by the Kresge Foundation. They had this great produce store. This was the asset. This was it. They had churches, of course, and schools and probably health facilities, but this is the community gathering space. So we had meetings in the community gathering space to figure out what it is, how to make that better, and what else to do in the neighborhood. And we came up with the idea for a harvest festival. So this was a community celebration in front of Peaches and Greens to get the community to give ideas. And we had a tent. You had to give it, if you gave your idea in the tent, these were ideas that were generated. People did the dots, the other things they wanted to do. If you gave your idea, you got a ticket, you got food. There was face painting. There was a little hayride for the kids. These people have, this is not people in this neighborhood don't have opportunities for hayrides and things, outdoor barbecuing and cooking. We painted pumpkins because it was Halloween. There was a bike repair. The bungee jumpy castle was the most expensive thing. We set up a basketball hoop, and the organizer said, do you want police there? You want police there? And the organizer said, no, we don't want police there because the kids who are in the gangs are members of the neighborhood, and they are part of the families that are here, and we want them to be part of this. So this is what it was. So this was a bigger project where we created a destination. It wasn't just Peaches and Greens, but there were game tables nearby in a field and a vacant lot, and places to play and community gardens and outdoor seating and bump outs and changes to the street. So it just went from being a one little destination to basically a 2-block area. That was the destination. And this is what it looked like when it was finished. So it provides access to healthy food, and there's classes on milk preparation, there's job training and support for culinary startups. And then on a really big scale, going back to the resilience piece in Hoboken, when it flooded, after Hurricane Sandy, their idea was Hoboken pledged to tie resilience and recovery planning, which was funded by Rebuild by Design, to their Vision Zero pedestrian safety initiative and to their water main replacement project, with the goal of building the social fabric of the city and the social cohesion of the different neighborhoods. So it was recovery, but they already had a Vision Zero plan, and they already had to replace other water mains. And they were looking at how to create a more inclusive, welcoming city. And they pulled all of this together with these projects that happened at a very pedestrian human scale. So, taking out parking and putting in bioswales with plants. So there's the resilience benefit and the community benefit, reducing impervious surfaces, making the crossing safer because they took parking away from the intersections, pedestrian crashes or pedestrian tragedies. They're not accidents, they're crashes. Decreased, and their Vision Zero goals were aligned, but it also provided space for better drainage. This is where they took up asphalt and daylighted all the Belgian block, which percolates water better, but it created a plaza for the community to enjoy and wider areas, more sidewalk for people to walk to and from the PATH train, and social gathering spaces instead of parking. I love their funny, wonderful rainbow crosswalk. And, they made the bus stop. They did all kinds of bike lanes to integrate bikes and transportation and buses. They turned the city hall into a demonstration garden with water tanks that hold the water so it doesn't just fall off the roof and run down the hill. They use that to water their plants, teaching gardens, demonstration gardens. They built a retaining wall to keep the water from flooding where their archives and all of their city records are. But they built it in such a way that there's a perfect 18-inch high sit wall, and that's where they do all these native plantings. And then they got sort of bigger scale and built these resiliency parks in the Northwest areas in neighborhoods, low-income neighborhoods that had no green space at all. So this is green space and flood mitigation. At the same time, it was an asphalt-covered site. Now it's a vegetative park that will manage 1 million gallons of stormwater. And there's places for people, ice rig, fountain, all of this stuff. And then underneath this is what's happening. You know, this is everything comes down drains, goes back to the Hudson River. And they did a similar park in the southwest part of the city. It's the first resiliency park with integrated green infrastructure to mitigate flooding. There's rain gardens, porous pavers, a cistern for rainwater harvesting, and there was low interest financing from the New Jersey Environmental Infrastructure Financing Program. There's recreational space, a dog park, pop-up market, multi-level seating, and restrooms. And this is what it looks like underneath. I think that's the same one. It is. Okay, never mind. So that's, again, like the Springfield example, building back better, creating green space in neighborhoods that didn't have it, community gathering spaces, outdoor safe public spaces for families to enjoy, that also captured and retained and stored stormwater to keep the neighborhood from flooding. So in conclusion, so strengthening community and social networks, I think we talked a lot about last time, involving and informing the community, thinking about mental health as an element of disaster preparation and recovery, trusted action focused warning systems, making sure vulnerable populations are cared for, create a sense of safety, calm, and hope, foster optimism, shore up the infrastructure, and be sensitive to the needs of displaced people. So this is a little bit off topic, but it kind of goes back to sort of that bigger social resilience kind of a thing. And Judith Rodin, who's an amazing MIT professor and author, has said, not every disruption has to become a disaster. Building resilience and building resiliently are mitigating factors. So thank you so much. I know I ran through that very quickly. We can either take a break, or if some folks have questions for me, I'm happy to answer them. But I wanted to give you all a few minutes to kind of catch your breath and for me to catch my breath before we move into the next part. So feel free to take a break. If you want to hang out and chat with me, I am very happy to do that as well. Thank you. You could also put
Jennifer for the Rhinebeck demonstration. That was really cool.
Yes. Yay. Oh, good, Jennifer. Hi, you're talking about the tactical urbanism project that Scout did, and that was just like amazing. Do you want to talk about it for a minute? Do you want to tell people? Or do you want
Sure.
to send them to the link? It's up to you.
I mean, I can send them to the link, but I mean, we basically had a placemaking workshop with young people that was about a day, and it was really such an amazing exercise and experience. And I think all young people should do something like this. And it was around climate and also the development of our comprehensive plan. That's what we were sort of teeing up for them. And they had a presentation from Cynthia and Karine on placemaking. I did a little something on kind of futures thinking, and an exercise around that. Then they had a survey. They identified a few places in the village. So they walked around and kind of took note of what was working, what didn't. There was a lot of sensory observation as well. So sound and sight and smells and where the sun is. And we incorporated that. That was something that Karine really emphasized. And they really enjoyed it. And they were really paying attention to things in a different way than they ever kind of had before. And I think started to feel a sense of ownership and a stake in this in a really impressive way. And it was very interactive and hands-on. And so that was a really great way to engage young people as well. So then we came back, we took our little maps that they were carrying around with them. We put all of the observations on giant maps that were laid out on a table, and kind of compared notes and so on. And then talked about a little bit about design and how you can design spaces differently and what would their priorities be. And there was other things that we did, but that's kind of the essence of it. And they really had these amazing insights and very kind of strong opinions about what works for youth and what youth needed. And it was a really exciting initiative. And we were shown a video on tactical urbanism, and they loved this. I think that really appeals to young people. I mean, it's not totally, I guess it can be kind of subversive, which I think appeals to them, but also it can be, you can do it in conjunction with the community, but it puts power into their hands. And for young people, I think that sense of agency is really important to create. So that was something that they were very interested in. They identified the safety issues walking to school as a priority area. And so then working with, in this case, this was where you had to definitely work with the government on doing this tactical urbanism project on creating safe walks, a safe walk to school. So they looked at where there needed to be a sidewalk, where it was missing, and then also where there were crosswalks that were missing and kind of a rather dangerous intersection. And so they worked with, they came up with the design, they worked with the mayor, Vanessa, our trustee, with the local police, and basically chalked out the crosswalks, put in cones to define the sidewalk and stuck little flowers in them. And it was supposed to, you know, all be kind of bright and colorful and eye-catching and happy. And there was a survey that went with it. And I think something like 35 people responded, and they were all entirely positive, which was really nice to see. So it was a great initiative. I think we unfortunately didn't have quite the turnout amongst young people that we wanted in terms of their participation, but this also happened over, some of the planning was done over summer, and then it happened right at the beginning of the school year. So that was a bit of a challenge, but certainly we saw that there was a lot of interest in this amongst young people, and it has a lot of potential. And Scout put together like a kind of a tactical urbanism plan, or different things that could be done that fed or came from the workshop and the priorities of young people. And I know they're not really doing tactical urbanism, but the middle school is working with some kids, and they're kind of doing more mapping on the safe walk to school. So it's more of a mapping exercise, but they're continuing with that, which is really great. But it was an amazing experience. And, you know, I think what Cynthia showed here and what we saw there is like really seeing these other examples from other communities is so inspiring and so creative and innovative. And it lets them see the kind of potential that's out there. So it was amazing. And I would recommend that we do more of this and that other communities do more of this. And it was fantastic.
Great. Thank you, Jennifer. Awesome. Oh my God. Something weird just popped up on my screen. Okay, good. It's gone. Great. Okay. All right. So people checked out, and I can't tell if they're back, but they're here or they're not yet. Okay, there's Margot is back. Yes, if you're back, just turn your camera on so I know that you're here. Oh, thanks, Jennifer. Okay. All right, and Laura's here. Okay. All right. And we know that Melissa is not. Okay, I think we're going to get started with our next activity. So I am assuming that many of you, if not all of you, did the community resilience assessment. And what I wanted to do just very briefly was to go around the room and ask people to identify 5 things that were the most challenging. Because we're going to talk about the good stuff after that. So I'll call you as I see you, if that's okay. And this is not to embarrass anyone or any community, but 5 things that were either challenging or surprising to you. I think challenging, but if they're surprising, that's okay too. Just that you're like, wow, we're really not doing really well on this particular item. Because the idea is that the things, those are the red dots, for example, that you're not going to fix right away. But if our green and yellow dots sort of start moving in that direction, we can bring the red dots along. So I'm going to put you on the spot, if that's okay with folks. And I'm going to start with Laura.
So I just want to say I'm a little atypical because maybe I'm joining this conversation more looking at it from, you know, the Mid-Hudson system, which is really a collection of 66 neighborhoods or locations, right? But in doing this, I cheated a little bit. I did it with my son, who is like-minded and very interested in local spaces and improving communities. I recently moved to Hopewell. I moved in 2019. I was still working in a different place. And that first year I was still just, you know, traveling back and forth, didn't get to know the neighborhood. And then that was going to be my goal for 2020. And of course, COVID hit. So I'm really still brand new in the neighborhood I live in and really disconnected from everything. So it was an interesting exercise for me to do because I realized, you know, there was a point at which I felt like, how could I do this? But the truth is if I'm not aware of something, then maybe other people aren't aware of, you know, still coming into this neighborhood with, as a new person, I could see where there are holes in information, maybe. But some of the things that really jumped out to me are, I do live very close to kind of the center of town, which has parks and recreation areas for children. However, there's no connection between those parks and the bike trail. There's literally a fence that blocks it off. And so I don't understand what that's about. I also don't understand why the sidewalk stops when the residences really start to take over. So I really am not, I'm probably under a quarter mile from the park, but it's sort of unsafe for me to walk there. And also even I'm maybe a 2-minute ride from a grocery store, but couldn't walk that because it's just unsafe. So definitely walkable sidewalks or making use of connecting the spaces that are already in place are something that was a whole. And then the other thing I was thinking of is we're very close to Beacon, which is our local train station. We have one bus, it runs to Beacon, but the hours are 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. So if I was a commuter, I have to drive to a train station. There's no way for me to hop on a bus and take it to a train station. So I was just surprised by that when we started to piece together some of that.
That's great, Laura. Yeah, I mean, these things kind of become kind of obvious when you start looking at them and you're like, why is it the way it is? And it's because of that sort of top-down project-driven sort of process. Leola, would you like to go next?
So I was having a little bit of a dilemma between several projects. So I literally wrote on the side of the chart, one community and the other, and filled out the numbers for each of them. But one of them, you know, speaks to what you said in terms of getting everyone's thoughts and voices together. It begins here too with this project. You sort of need to partner with at least another person to kind of fill in the gaps and stuff. And I didn't do that too much. And so I found I didn't know the answers to a lot of these things. And I think when you involve the community, so that's a little bit of a lesson, you know, to kind of, yeah, I don't have my finger on the pulse of everything. But to Laura's point, like the sense of physical space, you can notice personally that you can't walk to that park or store, or why does the sidewalk kind of end? And some of that work. So the one community where I am right now, my home in Irvington, I've been working for a long time on things like that thing where why isn't there a sidewalk on the east side of Broadway and only on West, and people from the east can't really walk over, and the unsafe biking and similar issues that you mentioned. But I was also, and this is, so Irvington is a pretty populated, fairly, affluent Hudson River village. And then the other one was Claremont, and it's very urban, and it has no school, no anything. And so it was really very different answers. But some similar answers too, just in terms of the disconnect with the safe walking and biking, and not news to any of us in terms of, how our car centric our country really is. And let's see, what other things jumped out at me? Yeah, so a number of the questions that I realized I needed to kind of involve more folks into helping me answer. And let's see, certain things, I don't know, Cynthia, when people come up with these things, is it sometimes some of the questions just literally not applicable? I mean, okay, because I was kind of like, I don't know if this really would even make sense to address at all. Let's see, but also the recognition of, some of the resources you have that maybe are underutilized. That my thoughts went to that community in Mexico that had this, kind of unused space, and how you can sort of inexpensively. So in Claremont, there's this firehouse that has an enormous amount of picnic tables and a kind of gathering hall and things, but it's really not used by the community. And if people began to be to do more there and get to know each other more, and because there's this big divide of all these people from the city moving up, and then these rural people, and never the two shall meet, I don't think. And so kind of an evolving community. It's really a neat idea to see if you can kind of get people to know each other better and where each other's coming from, so that divides aren't created. And I don't know that there are big divides, I just know that there's big differences, and it's okay. Trying to think if there's anything else useful that I observed that would
That's
say.
good. You can stop there.
Yeah, okay.
Thank you, Leola. I'm cutting you off a little bit. Kathleen, we'd love to hear from you.
Hi. Well, so like Laura, I'm new to where I am. So there's a lot of stuff I felt like I don't still have a good sense of the community, right? So anyway, the bikeability, walkability stuff really stood out for me. And also actually what Laura was saying, the other thing I had been thinking about a lot, I was, looking at maps and thinking like, where could you put bike lanes and stuff like that? And thinking about how places are not always well connected to one another. So, just thinking in Rhinebeck about where the grocery store is, for instance, right? And it's blocked off from the town by, the fairgrounds, and, there's just no other way to get there than on Route 9, which just seems insane to me. But so there was, that. And I guess I was also thinking more about how in the downtown, just in the center of town, there's just no real, seems to me anyway, gathering place. Like right at the main crossroads in Rhinebeck, there's a huge parking lot across from the hotel on the one corner. And I guess it belongs to that restaurant or something, I don't know, but just seems like, wow, this is like a parking lot. Like what could be a worse thing to have on the central, intersection of a town, and there's a little bench, on the sidewalk, but that's not very community building. The other thing I've noticed, it's funny, Laura, that you mentioned it too, was with regard to public transit, or, like just getting to the train station in Rhinecliff. I mean, you got to get somebody to give you a ride. It's just like, that's crazy. That should be an easy, relatively easy, public transit, I would think, or at least some parts of the day. I mean, in terms of, I don't know, like other services and like for seniors or, the healthcare stuff, I just don't feel connected enough. And some of the, like one of my neighbors that I talked to, I guess she wasn't accessing that stuff. So part of it is that I'm just too new. So, but those were some of the things that really stood out to me.
Yeah, I feel that there's a theme here. My husband he's not from the US, and he's just amazed. He said it to me years ago when we met. He says, the US is the only places where buses don't stop at train stations. He says, what craziness is that? You go anywhere in Europe and you can take a bus to the train and the train to the bus, like they're connected. But here it's like the bus goes by and the train's over here, and it's just everything is uncoordinated, and it's all these different operators, I guess, but it just, like, the logic of it is really hard to comprehend. Maria, you're up next. Did you have a chance to do your form? You do your
So, yes, hi. Well, I had a great group to do the form with because Andy Wilner and Andy attended last week, and Cynthia very kindly have allowed us to tag team this workshop because I was teaching last time, and Andy's away now. But all that said, I didn't catch up with the class until over the weekend, so it didn't give me much time to do the homework. But Andy and I are both working on this project called Rosendale Heart and Soul, which is the Orton Foundation project that I think he maybe mentioned last week. And so our meeting was last night, and so we had 10 people from the community who are, enthusiastic, active, curious community members, and unanimously voted to amend the agenda so that we could work on the assessment. So that was nice, but we had a technical problem starting the meeting with Google, and our 1 hour meeting started 15 minutes late, 20 minutes late. It was a nightmare. And so we didn't have much time to work on the assessment, but everybody loved it, was very, very intrigued and excited by it. So and everyone wants to continue working on it at the next meeting. So that's what we're going to do. I think it's going to be really good for the group. I mean, it's just such a different way of thinking about things and looking at things. I think everybody was very refreshed by that and excited by it.
great. Well, we'd love to see the results.
Yeah.
When you have them.
Yeah, well, we did run through the first page. So if we get to that conversation, I'm happy to share.
Okay, great. All right, Caitlin, you can share with us whatever your observations were and challenges and issues. And yeah.
Do you want me to do observations as well, or just challenges, or?
Yeah, well, I guess the challenges, observations, if you wanted to talk about things other than transportation, bike lanes and walking, I'm just sort of cognizant of our time, and you can say, yeah, we have the same issues, but some other things that might have come up for you.
Sounds great. Yeah, so we definitely, some of the issues definitely came up were safe routes to schools. I'm living in Rhinebeck, so speaking on behalf of Rhinebeck, safe routes to schools was definitely an issue. Access to safe biking and pedestrian, as well as sort of lack of access for like bus shelters, bus schedules, like kind of understanding of the bus system and how it works, and can you get there from here, or that kind of thing. And then another thing that I'll just add was sort of a lack of community gathering spaces that were sort of like lack of places to interact. So when I take my kids to the park, it's like I'm walking to the park and then I'm isolated at the park, which is like a mile away from downtown, and there's no one walking through the park. I can't grab a latte, so you're there's sort of a lack of natural interaction places, just because there's a lack of kind of green space in the center of town. So I think those were the major problems that came up.
Great. All right, thank you. Thank you, thank you. Margot, you're up next. If you're ready to share.
Unmute. So I am in Rhine Cliff. Well, first of all, just addressing the trying to get to the Rhine Cliff train station. Apparently in the new grand overhaul of the Rhine Cliff train station, there is some thought about having some kind of a tram or trolley that would, I think, connect Red Hook and Rhinebeck to the station. So, but for me, again, in Rhine Cliff, flooding is an issue. When it rains, because we're Rhine Cliff and it's a cliff, all the water goes often under people's homes, and then we have pipes that pipe it out onto the street where it just pools and makes ice rinks in the winter. So I would love to see some kind of, Sue had some great ideas about this, but I'm not sure how well they would work in the wintertime, but maybe they would. But some kind of permeable pavement, or I think Sue had ideas of having like water gardens. She can speak to that. Anyway, so that was the big issue for me.
Great. Okay, we're just kind of talking about issues at this point, and then we're going to go to the ideas and solutions the next round. Okay, Sue, I guess you're up next. That was your intro. Okay, I have to ask you to unmute.
I was just saying about the form, it's written from a very urban-centric point of view. I think you know that already, because a lot of the questions weren't really applicable to, I did Rhine Cliff with a fellow community member. And some of the questions are very relative, which is like, this is what you know, but, and that's as far as you can go. But when I was talking to my friend Rudy, who did the survey with me, he's like, oh my gosh, you know, the places I've lived, I've been much more active and the community involvement has been so much greater. But for me, you know, having lived here, this is like the epitome of, you know, a very reactive community, you know, and active and close. So there is that relative point of view issue. I wanted to say to Kathleen, like, there's a sense of history, like Rhinebeck, you can't walk to tops, that's true. But where the CVS is now, used to be a market. And so that's something that might be addressed by zoning or, you know, some other mechanisms. And the bench and the center of the village, that used to be a gas station. So to me, it's much improved, you know, in a way. So we're kind of going forward, but very slowly. Let's see. Yeah, Rudy and I came upon like a few different solutions. Are we not talking about solutions at this point?
Yeah, we're not talking, we'll do solutions next.
Okay.
So hold that thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
But some problems were the light, the sound, the flooding. So those were the problems that we identified.
Okay, great. Okay, Janet, are you with us? Hello, Janet. Okay, we'll come back. And Manish Shaw, I don't know if you actually were here last week. You might not have had a chance to do this community assessment. But
no, I don't. Actually, I'm from MPO, Nimtech. So I'm just here to, you know, get some ideas.
Okay.
Because we are working on developing the resilience improvement plan. So we see if we can just, you know, get some ideas and include it in our plan.
And what is that? Is that for a specific community or area or region?
No, it's a Nimtech wide. It's a region wide, Nimtech region.
Nimtech region.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we're glad you're here.
Yeah.
So that's fantastic. Okay, so now we're going to go back, and now we're going to start talking about the fun stuff, which are your ideas for how to sort of do the power of 10, how to connect these things all together. So we asked you, well, I asked you for 10, which is too many, but 10 places that are already helping build the resiliency, 10 places that have the potential, and then ideas on how these places could be improved right away. So if you wanted to sort of combine them together, or just focus on, I'm assuming that your 3 to 5 ideas for how these places could be improved right away kind of coalesces them, but I'm not quite sure. So however you want to do it, if you want to list your 10 resilient places and your 10 potential places, and 3 to 5 ideas on how to fix them in the short term, and a couple of long-term improvement ideas, we can do that. You have 4 minutes each to do all of that. Kathleen has to jump at 6:45 or 7 o'clock, and I'm going to ask Kathleen to go first, if you would, please.
Okay, well, I don't have a ton of ideas. I mean, one of my ideas was, I don't have a picture of it, but there's a way in which a bike path is built along the Cross Island Parkway on Long Island that I thought, wow, and it's kind of made also as a park. So instead of just being a transit route, it's kind of got multiple purposes. So people use it for recreational purposes, but also for getting places, on their bike. So, or pedestrian. And I thought it would be so cool to have something like that along the Route 9 corridor between, like Rhinebeck and going out past the fairground. And I don't know who owns any of that land. That probably, impossible. But anyway, it just seemed like that would be a very cool idea. I have noticed, unrelated to transit, I have noticed a lot of the whole area seems to have a very high water table, and there's a lot of places where there seems to be flooding, not just Rhinecliff. And it seemed to me that it would be, good to have more permeable, either parking lots, right, or some of the other surfaces, even some of the pedestrian areas, it would be better to have some more permeable stuff so that there's better drainage. And then the other thing I had been thinking about was, because I've noticed the park where the library is too, and it seems so isolated from town. And, so there's a connection issue, but then I was also thinking about how, there's not a reason to hang out there unless you're there for a specific recreational activity. And it seems like it's a place that could maybe, have more, even if it just had a cafe and a little, I don't know, something else where, people might want to hang out and meet one another, or, if they're taking their kids, like Caitlin was mentioning, taking your kids to the park, but then, you're just sort of stuck there waiting for the kids to be done playing or something, it's not kind of versatile enough. So maybe there's a kind of development there that could happen. Those were just some of the ideas I've had. Again, I haven't been in the area that long, but those were just some of the things that occurred to me.
Okay, great. Well, then I'm going to jump to Laura, because you mentioned the magic L word, and to see if Laura has thoughts about libraries or other things. I don't want to put words in your mouth. I'm just thought it'd be a good segue.
Well, kind of. I guess one thing that jumped out at me as I was thinking about the fact that for some of the questions I had no clue, I didn't know the answers, and it was because I really haven't learned enough about my community. And I know that something in a library that I was working at previously, we were tossing around the notion of maybe connecting with real estate agents and sort of creating like a welcome kind of basket or some sort of way to connect with new residents when they come in, to give them information on, like, here's your library card, and by the way, these are the things the community has to offer. Because both in the community I live in now and the community I moved from, everything is very family centric. And my children are now adults and not here half the time. So I'm coming in as a older single person, and not really connected because I don't have a kid who does soccer or, you know, I guess if there are churches, but if you're not involved in that kind of an aspect of things, you're sort of left out empty and not knowing how to get involved. So that might be a way that libraries could fill that void. So that is one thing that I was thinking about. And then the other ideas for my community was, again, just to me, the low-hanging fruit is definitely how can we, it seems easy enough to try to figure out how to connect the spaces that are green spaces and are heavily used to things like the bike path. And also then how can we connect neighborhoods to the bike path? Because so often the neighborhoods are gated off from that. You actually have to drive 5 minutes to park your car to get on the bike path when maybe there's a way to get through a path through the woods. And I know maybe some of that's controversial, but maybe if we had more community interaction, people would be more open to sharing those communal spaces and having someone walk through a path that came into their neighborhood. We seem so isolated from each other. And to me, from a resiliency point of view, that will be our downfall. There are people who are connected, and there are other people like myself right now who are not. And it made me realize also personally, I have to do more to get more connected in my neighborhood. So that's what I have.
That's excellent. Thank you. That's terrific. Let's see. Let's go to Caitlin next.
Great, thank you. All right, again, speaking from the Rhinebeck perspective, I was able to kind of hone in on transportation. And I spoke with someone Angela, who I'm sure a lot of people know, who's super involved with transportation kind of planning and involved in the comprehensive plan. And I was mostly just super impressed with how much actually really smart people are thinking about this and already doing a lot of work to kind of envision what transportation could look like in Rhinebeck. So they've kind of come up with this like amazing list of recommendations that have been sort of proposed to the comprehensive planning. And then they're going to kind of include all of those some of those recommendations into a comprehensive plan that then kind of guides what Rhinebeck could look like in the future. And then also sort of gives you kind of the background in order to say, okay, we're going to apply for this grant to get these bike shelters. Or so for me, it was just really helpful to understand kind of the context from which you see like, oh, I can't walk to school. But then you also understand like, okay, people are really working on this. And so I thought that was actually really encouraging. In terms of things to do, sort of similar to what Jennifer, you were saying, I think like potentially some like a parking day. I think that would be super fun in Rhinebeck, just to kind of take over a parking spot, set up maybe, bump outs as well. So sort of these like traffic calming temporary structures to kind of show what it could look like, similar to what the youth did with the tactical urbanism sidewalk. So I think there's opportunities for kind of building on that momentum and engaging the youth as well. And yeah, just kind of supporting the folks that are coming up with all these great ideas. So that's it.
That's very good. Okay, up next, we'd like to hear from Sue C, because Sue had ideas and we want to hear your ideas.
Okay, great. One of the things I just wanted to say was, I don't know if it was in there, but in the instructions, it would have been good for me to walk around the hamlet of Rhinecliff, because I totally forgot about the Rhinecliff dock, which is such a key element in resilience. And it's like, I was just thinking from here, but I think walking around, I mean, that's just such a clear, huge asset of our community. Some of the things we were thinking of in terms of solutions were a bike path from the village to here, to Rhine Cliff, from Rhinebeck to Rhine Cliff. And, not on the road because it's not very safe. And I think they are working on that, but I don't know how far it's getting. So that was one of the things. And then the idea that Margot was talking about was to make Rhine Cliff a giant sponge, like maybe impermeable surfaces, all kinds of deep rooted perennials, and like have a plant sale to the community, like plant these in your yard and just create this giant pollinator friendly sponge for our community, because we have serious drainage issues here. But on top of that, I thought maybe we should get a hydrologist. I think the town of Rhinebeck doesn't really consider Rhine Cliff in the same way as they do like new developments, but we are a very dense hamlet, and I think we deserve to have a study done of our drainage, because it is everybody has basements that flood during the the high the big rains. Then the pie in the sky was bury the power lines, and at the same time new drainage infrastructure, and new water supply lines, because I think those are outdated. And I did want to ask, maybe Margot has the answer to this. We did do a series of community related events where everybody came together at maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 different venues to give their input, what was important to them, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But we never heard back. It's like, and that's where I think they lost the interest in, participation. It's like, they just dropped it. It's like, okay, we all spent time, we went to these meetings, and now there's no feedback. And this is like a year later, possibly. So I did want to.
Yeah, I don't know what happened with that. I think there was this, I think there was a sense that there was such a division, and maybe results will be too contentious. I'm not really sure. I'll check into that. Yeah, good point.
But thank you, Cynthia. This has been great.
You're very welcome. Yeah, and that's what I was saying about like those short-term experiments, because they show that something has been done and is happening, and that takes more than one person to, to pull off, obviously. But it's just even if it's just, I don't know, like a community swap sale where everybody just like takes their crap out of their garage and drives it to a town lot, and then you just buy each other's junk and put it back in your garage. Community swap sale. There's, things like the community dinners where like a potluck supper, you invite people over to talk about a topic of concern, or an issue or something. But yeah, there's these little things that really sort of demonstrate, or that people take advantage of, or they just take initiative. There was a gentleman I knew, and he went to one of our meetings, and he lives in outside of Toronto, Canada. And he just like put a bench, he had a bench, he just put a bench in front of his house along the sidewalk. And cancel, sorry. He put a bench outside of his house in front of the sidewalk, and people would stop by and they would sit on the bench, and he would go out and talk to them. And he met his neighbors that way. And then another neighbor put another bench out. And this was like a long walk between where older people were coming and they just needed a place to sit down, or kids from after school. And he just started creating sort of these little, they just started putting benches, that they had in their house, or they bought or made themselves, to start making those connections to community and figuring out what else to do. And then he decided to actually run for town council, and then he got elected. And I think there's a lot more benches now happening in Mississauga. But these little small actions, that people can take, you don't need permission. You just sort of need to think about what might work for you, because people notice these things. And the whole idea with these ideas is that there's a lot of people that are like not interested or against it or resistant. And as they see things happening, they want to jump on the bandwagon. And at the end of the day, the mayor who really couldn't give you the time of day, takes total credit for everything. And that's kind of okay. You know, as long as you know in your heart that he knows in his heart or her heart that you all made it happen. But, you know, that's a good thing. So these things are really, it's really important to start these little turnkey operations. We're going to go to Leola next.
So I was thinking about some of the solutions or, you know, that would really speak to resiliency and like, for example, in Irvington, the schools are very ample space. One of them in particular houses the farmer's market and our food scrap drop off and things. So they're already a known sort of comfortable community place to go. But I don't know if some giant disaster happened and everyone had to sleep in the gym or something, there isn't solar panels or, you know, no off the grid switch or something. So even if they offered Wi-Fi and electricity or heating and cooling, if it was, if you couldn't get the fuel to whatever fuel source does the heating or cooling or the electricity, you know, it wouldn't be a very helpful emergency place, a resilient place. So I think that we need to think about these things for our future resilience as a lot of, you know, extreme weather events and things happen. Even in terms of, you know, Rhine Cliff. So for example, as things flood and stuff, and if there are, I don't know, things needed to be delivered by boat or something or other, you know, like you said, that access to that dock as a potential solution for, I don't know, like the Andy here with the post-carbon logistics, like sailboats and bringing stuff when there's no fuel to be able to transport things in other ways. I don't know, Irvington has this riverfront too, but also the Claremont that I did this example for. It's a community that literally borders the river, a big long stretch of it, and the community has no public access to the river, none. And so I don't know, just kind of thinking about these potential solutions and starting to bring that firehouse into the view with so much space and, you know, potential for community gathering.
Yeah, that's awesome. There was I did a project a long time ago where the community, where the firehouse was where kids went after school to do their homework, because these were not volunteer fire stations. These were like funded fire stations where the firemen, the fire people are there much of the day, hopefully bored to death because there's no fires. And so this was an after school program for help with math and science and STEM classes where the firemen were mentoring the kids. And it actually helped with creating really good images of like male role models, because a lot of these men were fathers and they were older, and many of the young people really didn't have fathers living at home. So this was like a positive role model. And of course they got to like climb on the trucks and play on the pole, of course, but they partnered, you know, with the after school programs to have the classes there rather than at the school where I don't think there was any room. So though, you know, human resources are the same thing. And then there's the gals in Newberg, Oregon, who the aerobics group or the jazzercise group that like there was no heat in their gym. They went to the police station and they said, you've got this big room. We're just taking over. We're going to do aerobics here every Monday at 5. Shut up. We just need the space and we pay for this building and you're not using it. And so they just moved their jazzercise class into the police station. So we pay for all those facilities and we pay these people's salaries, and there are things that they can teach us in space that they have. So I love that idea of bringing in some of these unsuspecting, unlikely kind of civic buildings and resources that have one job, put out fires and catch bad people. But, you know, there's more that they need to do for us that they can be helpful. Okay, Maria, I know you only did page 1 and I don't want to put you on the spot, but I didn't want to give you a chance to share what you
Thank
have.
you. I don't have a lot to report in the way of any kind of fixes. We had a few surprises when we were filling out the beginning of the survey. None of us knows what happens at the schools, and none of us have ever been to any of our local schools, which was pretty odd. But I'll leave it at that because I know we're short on time and apologize. for
Well, no,
not-
actually, we have a little bit more time than we thought we had, because everyone was so concise. So
Oh, well, in that case,
another moment.
yeah, well, so we're doing this Rosendale Heart and Soul Project, which is about interviewing the people of our town and finding out what they like about the town and what they don't like about the town. And I think that we haven't started going out to do that yet, but I'm thinking that this assessment really has some interesting questions to use as we do that process. And we'll be recording all of the interviews we do, and then we'll be combing through them for action ideas. And we'll be having those kind of meetings where we go out to those people's meetings instead of, just having our own meetings. And so, what you're doing here is very much in line with, and we're hoping that you can come and talk to our group at some point, really. Yeah, it's all very much of a piece and really exciting to hear everybody else looking at their towns in the same way. I mean, it would be kind of interesting to have a little affinity group and stay in touch with each other about how things are going.
Yeah, I mean, we can do that. We have, I've shared out everyone's email addresses. Could maybe talk to Melissa about, or maybe Maria would like to sort of help organize that, or but definitely sharing out what your Heart and Soul Project. Do you want to talk a minute about what that program is? Because everyone on this call is eligible to
Yeah,
apply.
I'd be happy to. Especially, there seems to be a Rhine Cliff contingent here.
Yeah,
I thought you might be interested. So what it is it's a program developed by the Orton Foundation. It's 2 years, and they have really created like a fulsome program here. And there's like a lot of administrative infrastructure that they provide in terms of a very detailed plan of how to do this. And when you get accepted into the program, you get a $10,000 matching grant to get you started. It's not cheap. It's $80,000 to $100,000 that you need to raise for the 2-year program. And that's counting paying somebody to help, which we haven't done yet. So we are several months in and going a little slower than we had hoped. But we have a dedicated small group of people who are good. Development Committee. That's where we originally developed it, and then we fledged it off into a separate group. So now we're an indie group.
now you're an indie group. Okay. Yeah, that's great. So it's Orton, what's the website? Orton
Orton
Foundation.
Foundation, and the website is communityheartandsoul.org. And the Orton Foundation is the Vermont Country Store people.
Yes, they are. And they actually, when I showed you some examples from like Thomasville, Georgia, and Houston, Mississippi, and Franklin, New Hampshire, and Hallam, Nebraska, the Orton Family Foundation were partners on that project. That was all done
Oh,
by
neat.
the citizens. That was all done by the Citizens Institute of Rural Design, which I ran for 4 years. It was a program funded by the National Endowment for the Arts. And it was about providing technical assistance and resources to rural communities and small towns that had a design challenge, where they had something that they wanted to figure out how to turn their elementary school into a food production facility or a multi-use arts center, or repurpose a vacant building downtown, or rebuild after flooding, or work on, flooding parks. And so the Orton Foundation was our
Wow,
partner
that's
in that.
awesome. Well,
Yeah.
they've been great to work with so far. They've been very helpful and flexible.
Yeah. And then to get back to what Sue and Caitlin were saying, the Thomasville, Georgia project that had the flooding in the park, and we were all there with the school buses and the plans, that was one of their main ideas, was to do the remediation in the park, but all the residential around it was sort of up on a hill, and everyone had these beautiful manicured sloping draining lawns. And they wanted to get all these property owners involved in planting basically bioswales and rain gardens on their projects to keep the water in place on their land so it wouldn't flood into the park that actually had 3 creeks running through it, and to provide, you know, free planting for people and classes on horticulture and how to do planting. And so some did it themselves, some, you know, hired their landscapers to do it. But that was the idea, was how do we sort of make the area around this flooding area, keep the water there, you know, and protect it. And so that was a big push towards property owners and building owners as well. So I just wanted to highlight that. Okay, so then we were going to talk about moving forward and funding and all the amazing things that are happening. There's a lot of amazing things happening in the Mid-Hudson Valley, but Melissa had to pop off because where she is, she can't hear herself think. She has promised to put in the chat a lot of this information. A lot of it is also available on their website at sustainhv.org. I can put that in there. Sustainhv.org is the organization that is keeping track of grants, funding, program initiatives happening all over the Mid-Hudson Valley region. And there's the Hudson Valley HVCAN, the Hudson Valley Climate Action Network that Stu is part of. Should we all join? You want to tell us a little bit about that? About
yeah,
it's a new,
sure.
new entity.
It's a very new effort to network everybody, because we are a lot of small places and we don't know what's going on in other places. And so it's organized, you know, you can start a group if there isn't a group already, but around climate action. So it could be regenerative agriculture, it could be, you know, solar, you know, alternative energy. And so, but it's a great place to see what is happening and how you can get involved. And so I encourage everyone to join. And I will have to say, to join it, there's like a little plus sign on the upper right hand side of the screen, and that it has no text, but that's like where you would actually go to join.
So would you go to hvcan.org? Is that what we do?
Yes. Yeah.
And hit the plus sign.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So I'm writing this in the chat because I'm going to send you all the chat in a little bit. Okay, so that's, you know, this is part of the whole thing, is that we've all met each other and now we're all on each other's radar screens or LED readouts. And, you know, it's just good to know that a lot of our communities are facing a lot of the same challenges. And hopefully, our friend Manish is on this call, is paying very close attention, and there'll be a recording, Manish, because we need bike lanes and we need to connect our public spaces, and we need better transportation connecting to transit and community gathering spaces, and we need to look at the flooding and hydrology issues really closely. You know, we need to sort of work with our high school and middle school kids. Actually, middle school is a little interesting because they don't drive yet. So they haven't been sucked into the automobile culture. And they're very clever. And I really appreciate you all for being here. I appreciate your comments on this assessment, and I will take them to heart. If you have others, I believe you have my email. If you have other thoughts about this assessment form that you want to share, I'd be very happy to take a look at them. You know, and maybe in the future, there'll be more things on here that actually resonate. There will be things about transit. I don't know, but we're trying to sort of reach a range of communities. For example, at Kingston, which is, you know, still 20,000 people, is considered rural by official standards, even though we think of it more as like a small town or more of an urban area. But yeah, it's always ways, there's always ways to make things better. So I wanted to thank you all for your time and attention. And Melissa has just, I will read from Melissa. This is Melissa's closing remarks. I'm in a deafeningly loud place, so you have to do without my charming presence as a presenter. Clearly, Cynthia is on a roll. We had a presentation today on the Inflation Reduction Act with a couple of funding sources of interest to local governments. I will round up and share. There's also the Laura Jane Musser Fund for Rural Communities. And that is an application. It's Laura Jane Musser Fund, LauraJaneMusser. The applications open on the 16th and they're due on March 16th. And there's like $35,000 for implementation. And there's money for planning in rural communities. In New York, I know they do Ulster. I'm pretty sure Dutchess, they're very selective because it's where the board members have connections. I believe Dutchess is included as well. I know it's true. This is how it's founded. It's a family foundation. It's a very long application with a lot of questions. But if you have a project that's ready to go or you want planning money, the Laura Jane Musser Fund for Rural Communities is open just about now. Cynthia and I might prepare a proposal for the current round and potentially could angle it to work with some of the smaller communities you all represent. Justice 40 has a number of possibly relevant funding programs, and the NYSERDA Climate Justice Fellows Program supports stipends for people of color working in clean energy and resilience in communities. Looking forward to playing the recording. You all look so animated. So that is all going into the chat, and that will all be emailed out to you, so you will have a copy of it. And I just want to say this has really been a pleasure and an honor and a privilege for me. And I'm glad it seems that you enjoyed it as well and got a lot out of it. So I will let you all go back to your evenings and hope to see you all again in the very near future.
Yeah,
Just-
thank you.
Thank you,
Nice to
Cynthia.
meet and collaborate with you all.
Yes.
Thanks so much.
Bye, everyone.
Night.
Night.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Okay. That is my Zoom over. All right, it's just us, kiddo. I guess we're good. We can stop recording. View stop recording.
Good show.
Good show. You have all the chat.
Did everybody vote?
Yeah, we can stop recording now.
Okay, great job.
Great job. Record on this computer. Okay, I guess we're